Alright, I want to talk about the Stomp weapon art. So the Stomp weapon art is a weapon art commonly found in Ultra Great Swords. So all the Ultra Great Swords have them. The Bastard Sword has it as well, and the Dark Sword, as well as the Executioner Sword. But most Ultra Great Swords have them. The only Ultra Great Sword that doesn't have the Stomp stance weapon art is the Astora's Great Sword. As you can see here, Astora's has this charge attack. So all the other Ultra Great Swords have them. Alright, so Stomp is very useful in the sense that whilst you're in the stance, it offers you damage reduction and poise. It's a little bit different to Perseverance in the sense that you have to be in the stance to get the damage reduction and the poise buff. So once you're out of the stance, the damage reduction and poise buff doesn't apply anymore. So once you're in the stance, it's very, very hard to knock you out of it. The damage reduction is about 50%, and I'll demonstrate here. So I have 1430 HP, and we'll try test it on this enemy here. Okay, let's just try making it hit me. Okay. The lightning attack, right? Okay, now I have 1203 HP. Alright, so let's heal up. And let's try and get hit by the SAM attack while I'm in the stance. Okay? And you can see I took a lot less damage, 1317 HP. Okay? So Stomp, the damage reduction for Stomp works with both projectile weapons as well as melee attacks. So it works with against crossbows, bows, sorcery, as well as miracles. Like, see this lightning attack, but you have to be in the stance, so you have to time it. Works against players as well, so players will do less damage. See, I didn't time my stance properly there, and I didn't get the damage reduction, and I got stunned. Okay, so the stance can be followed up with an R1, or it can be followed up with an R2. Okay, cool. Let's just heal up, and I'll show you. Run out of FP, so let's reset the bonfire. Now, one thing you have to note is that the R2 follow-up is very cool because it does lift your opponent in the air, but don't use it against light weapons because you can easily be punished. It takes a lot of stamina and leaves you very, very open to attacks. Okay, so some Ultra Great Swords have the lift R2 follow-up following Stomp. Some of them have an overhead slam, like the Fume Ultra Great Sword has an overhead slam. Okay, one thing to note is that I'll show you what happens is that gotta be fast here. Oh, missed the window. Okay, I was gonna show you. See, my thrust defense actually went negative. I'll show you again. See, I have negative thrust absorption. Basically, you will take additional damage during the follow-up. So be aware of that. Even though you do a lot of damage with this attack, if someone has a thrust weapon and they hit a counter, particularly with a Leo Ring, they can do a lot of damage back against you as well. So just be aware of that. Now, one thing I want to show you in this video that's quite important is that Stomp with the Fume Ultra Great Sword is quite unique because it can block attacks. Okay, show you here. Here's this enemy, do the lightning attack. Okay, see how little damage I took. Basically, it can block attacks. See? It blocks, just like a shield. Let's see if we can... See? It blocks. Blocks the projectile attack. Blocks the attack. Just watch closely as I do this blocking. Okay? See, it does take stamina away during the block, but you cannot be guard broken. Okay, so you can't be guard broken during the stance. Yes, it can leave you very, very low stamina, but you cannot be guard broken. So somewhat it is a little bit superior to blocking like this. Blocking with a weapon, you can be guard broken, but blocking with stomp, you cannot be guard broken. Okay. Make sure to have FP, though. I don't know what happens when you don't have FP. I guess it's not as effective without FP, but see, blocks. But FP is something that's pretty easy to get back in a fight. You can just drink the blue Estus. See? I take maybe even less than a quarter of the damage. I still have a lot of HP, and I got hit 3 times by that lightning attack. Okay. So let's try again. Shall we do the lightning attack, my friend? Alright. Come on. Okay. Look how little damage I took. Right. So basically it works like a shield. Okay. When the stomp stands. Now you need to be aware using this in PvP, so you can't really easily use it upon reaction against players because you have to be in the stance. The damage reduction, it still applies when you're not in the stance, when you depress a button, but you don't get the poise buff. So sometimes the poise buff is not consistent, and you will still take damage, and you can still be stunned, right? Now, you can be dead angled with this block, so it only blocks frontal attacks. You can actually get hit from the side, but you'll still get the 50% damage reduction because you're in the stance of the stomp. So even if your opponent managed to dead angle you, you still get damage reduction. It's not like you're taking the full load of the damage, as long as you're in the stance. Okay. Another interesting thing is that stomp, when one-handed, will follow up with the one-handed R1. So, see, one-handed will follow up with a one-handed R1, and two-handed will follow up with a two-handed R1. So you can vary up your attacks quite a lot. Okay, so you can do one-handed, which is a swing attack. You can also use stomp in between attacks. So you can use stomp, for example, R1, stomp, and R1. You can actually move your character forward more. So it's a great way to push your character forward. Okay, see, have a look. My character moves forward. Alright, that is another useful thing about stomp. And finally, stomp can be actually used to avoid backstabs. So you have to, basically, if your opponent moves around for a backstab, you have to get into the stomp stance as they perform the backstab. Now, graphically on the screen, because there's lag, you have to pre-anticipate when your opponent's going to do the backstab. So a lot of players will run around your back with a shield. It's a very effective technique against Ultra Greatsword. So basically they run around with a shield, and if you attack them once and if you follow up, usually they will get a backstabbing. So what you can do to counter that is you can use R1, stomp, and follow up with an R1. Because stomp pushes your character forward, it basically pushes you out of the backstab range. But you have to do it as your opponent is going to do the backstab, and they will always miss. And if you do the stomp, if they miss, you can follow up with an R1. Sometimes you will get them with the follow-up R1. It depends on what weapon they're using. If they're using another ultra weapon, yes, you can get them, because the backstab animation with the ultra weapon is a lot slower than, say, a straight sword. So that's another very neat thing about stomp, that you can use it to avoid backstabs. I'll show you 2 videos following this, and you will be able to see that I used stomp effectively avoiding backstabs. So one was I avoided a backstab against a Dark Sword player, another one against the Claymore. So, alright. Hopefully you can use this more effectively in your PvP. And you can also follow up an R2 with Stomp. And follow up with another R1. It's very useful against heavier weapons. It's not so good against light weapons, but very good weapon art against heavy weapons. And as I said, when used correctly, you can avoid backstabs with it. And you can also poise for very large weapon attacks. Alright.